Disclaimer. In this video, we're going to talk about things such as free will, as well as some scientific studies that go along with that. Now, I know some people see free will as part of a religious aspect of their life, and I'm not saying neither one is right nor wrong. I just thought this was a fascinating study and topic and how it relates to witchcraft, and to get everyone's thoughts, views, and opinions in a respectful way. All right. Sorry, I dyed my hair, so it's going to look a little poofy. All right, let's get into it. Now, before we begin, I have a very important question to ask you guys. Are you guys the type to pronounce L in the word salmon? All right, now that we got the hard questions out of the way, let's jump into today's kind of controversial video. I'm hoping it's not that controversial, but I could kind of see how it could fit into that gray area. I just thought this was insanely interesting, and I figured that I would share it with you guys. We're going to do a brief sum up of everything before adding details to make sure it's kind of like easier to outline like the skeletal structure of everything, so then we can build upon that. So, what is the split brain theory? The split brain theory comes from studies done on patients who had undergone a procedure called a corpus callostromy, where the connection between the two halves of the brain is severed. This was usually done to treat severe epilepsy. But what scientists discovered was mind-altering. No pun intended. When the corpus callosum, which is like the bridge between the brain's two hemispheres, was cut, each hemisphere started working independently. The left side of the brain, which is generally responsible for language and logic, was no longer able to communicate to the right side, which handles things like creativity and like spatial awareness. And when that happened, it led to some seriously strange behavior. Now, one of the most famous experiments involved showing different images to each hemisphere. For example, they show a picture of a spoon to the left eye and a picture of a chicken to the right eye. The left eye controls the right hemisphere, and the right eye controls the left hemisphere. I think we're all pretty aware of that it's like whoop, whoop, crisscross. After the procedure, the patient was asked to point to the image that they saw. They might point to a chicken with their right hand, controlled by the left side of the brain, but asked to explain it, they would say, I saw a spoon, because the left hemisphere controls speech. The left hemisphere could talk, but the right couldn't. It was if there was like two separate minds working at once. So what does this matter for free will? Well, these experiments suggest that our brains may not be as like unified as we think. If each hemisphere can have its own thoughts and intentions, does that mean that we are not fully in control of our own actions? Could free will be an illusion? Or is it just more complicated than we thought? Some researchers argue that the left hemisphere, remember controlled by the right eye, being the more logical and verbal side, might take control and create narratives that explain why we do things. So while our right hemisphere might be acting on its own impulses, the left hemisphere might just come up with like a reason for it, making it seem like we are consciously choosing when maybe we're not. Now, this brings up a very interesting question. If our hemispheres are working independently, could it be that we have two separate minds in one body? In some cases, split brain patients have shown signs of what seems to be divided personalities. For example, one hemisphere might be really good and really like math, while the other prefers art. And they might even express different emotions like, dude, what the heck? So when we talk about free will, the split brain theory kind of complicates things. It suggests that the conscious self we think of might just be an after-the-fact explanation our brain makes up to justify actions that are actually just driven by an unconscious process. So does this mean that we don't have free will? Well, that's up for debate. Some philosophers and neuroscientists, neuroscientists, I can never say that word, argue that true free will might be an illusion, influenced by unconscious bias, our environment, and even our brain structure. Others believe that even if we're influenced by all these factors, we still have some degree of control over our decisions. But what the split brain research really shows us is that our experience of self and choice might not be as straightforward as we think. Our brains are incredibly complex, and understanding how our minds work is still something we're trying to figure out. Like, think about it. We are the only species that we know of that studies itself. Like, the brain studies itself. Like, how? It's so cool. It's so wild to me to think about. Okay, now that we got the basics, let's get into the nitty-gritty and really break it down and see how it relates to witchcraft. To briefly recap, the split brain theory suggests that when the connections between the two hemispheres of the brain is severed, each hemisphere starts to act independently, and it can lead to some strange, sometimes even contradictory behavior. To recap, the left hemisphere controls logic, language, and reasoning, while the right hemisphere is directly linked to creativity, intuition, and emotions. Let's get a little bit more details about the split brain theory now that we have the idea of what it is. So the split brain experiments were done by Roger Sperry and Michael Gazzaniga in the 1950s and in the 1960s from a surgical procedure used to help treat epilepsy. The experiment actually won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1982 for Roger Sperry. He found that if the hemispheres weren't connected, they functioned independently of each other, which he then called it the split brain. Sperry concluded with a severed corpus callosum, the hemispheres of the brain cannot communicate, and each one acts as the only brain. There can only be one! Any Highlander fans here? Probably not. Sperry concluded that the left hemisphere was responsible for not only articulating language, but also for understanding it and remembering it, while the right hemisphere, I should be going this way, the right hemisphere could only recognize words, but was not able to articulate them. That supported the previous known idea that the language center was in the left hemisphere. On a side note, like, this could go into an even deeper dive if you think about brainwave states and everything, but that could be its own video. So I'm not even going to touch upon that in here. You know, like for meditation, trance work, things like that. But anyway, Sperry concluded that the right hemisphere had some like language recognition ability, but no speech articulation, which meant that if the right hemisphere could recognize or read a word, but it could not pronounce that word, so the person would not be able to say it or know what it was. The hemispheres of the brain functioned separately as two different brains and did not acknowledge the existence of the other hemisphere, as the description of the object did not match the drawing. Sperry concluded that even though there was no apparent signs of disability in some people with a severed corpus callosum that they did not have before, the hemispheres did not communicate, so it compromised the full function of the brain. The global I always struggle with this word. It's such a hard word for me. Neuronal workspace theory seems to endorse the split brain theory. I think they call it split consciousness, given that each hemisphere of the brain has its own prefrontal hub, enabling broadcasting of whatever information is processed in that specific hemisphere. Like, isn't this wild to think about? I know I talk about it like it's a breaking news study. It's not like new, but there are new studies being done all the time on this, and they're all just so fascinating to read about. I feel like we kind of have a very good idea on what the split brain theory is at this point. So let's get into the witchcraft and the occult side of it, and what this could mean for witchcraft and magic. In witchcraft, free will is most often viewed, not always, but most oftenly viewed as a balance between personal autonomy and the influence of external, spiritual, or cosmic forces. Some witches believe that individuals have the power to shape their own destiny. We're not getting to the topic of like fate, free will versus fate, or anything like that. This is just witchcraft, free will, and the split brain theory. But most witches believe that individuals have the power to shape their own destiny. But that power isn't isolated. It can be intertwined with the energies of the universe, the will of the gods, ancestors, or even natural forces. There's this understanding that you could choose your path, but that path can also be shaped by unseen magical influences, divine intervention, so on and so forth. This idea echoes something similar in the split brain theory. It suggests that our conscious sense of self, which we might consider to be our free will, isn't always as unified as we think. In fact, there might be other forces at play, be it unconscious process or deeper spiritual energies that influence our actions in ways we might not be fully aware of. Now, to take this a step further, in many magical traditions, free will is seen as a dance between conscious choice and cosmic influence. This is a lot like the split brain theory, where there are two minds, the logical verbal mind and the more intuitive subconscious mind. And these parts of the brain sometimes work in harmony. Other times they can be at odds with each other. Just as a witch may consciously choose to cast a spell, okay? There could be seen as other forces at work. The energy of the ritual, the power of the intention, the spirits or deities invoked, if you work with the spirits and the allies of plants and herbs, or the energy of candles, what each element embodies. And that can influence the outcome. Some witches believe that the universe responds to our intent, but it's not always a simple, straightforward cause and effect. There are layers of influences, much like how the two hemispheres of the brain might simultaneously process information and create responses that seem disconnected from each other. You know, my cat has the whole couch to lay, and I'm pushed against the corner because this is where she wants to lay. So I'm sorry, this is an awkward viewing angle. Are you going to let me sit on the whole couch? Okay, never mind. One idea in witchcraft is that magic often works through the subconscious mind. The conscious mind, represented in the left hemisphere in split brain theory, is one that does the thinking. Kitty, don't show your butthole on camera. But the subconscious, associated more with the right hemisphere, holds our deeper desires, our intuitive knowledge, and our connection to the spiritual world. In a similar way, when the two hemispheres of the brain are disconnected in split brain patients, we can see how actions driven by the unconscious mind might not always align up with the rational conscious self. This tension can be seen in witchcraft, or I should say could be seen in witchcraft, as a struggle between the mundane, logical mind and deep intuition or deep intuitiveness, and sometimes irrational forces of magic and intuition. Now, many religious and spiritual traditions affirm that human beings possess agency, that our choices carry weight and meaning. Yet, they often acknowledge the presence of Laja, often unseen, spiritual forces, be it divine will, fate, karma as we think of it, that shape or can even dictate the flow of events. So where does that leave free will? Is it real or just an illusion? Within pagan and magical communities and traditions, we often speak of like true will, that a lot see as our deepest, most authentic purpose. In the act of working our will, for lack of a better way of explaining it, as a sacred expression of personal power. For Wiccan specifically and Wiccan-related paths, one of the gravest, I guess you could say, ethical breaches, but at the heart of Wiccan mortality lies the Wiccan Rede. You know, it's in 8 words, the Wiccan creed or Rede fulfills, and it harm none, do what ye will. There's different variations of it, but along those lines. Threefold law type of deal. And it harm none, do what ye will. Though a lot of people have left Wicca due to this specific message, myself included, but not for reasons that you may think. But anyway, its message is pretty clear. You are free to act according to your own will, as long as your actions do not bring harm to someone else's free will. While some interpret this as like a strict prohibition against causing any harm whatsoever, it's more commonly seen as like a moral framework that upholds personal freedom, but not without responsibility. This emphasis on will speaks directly to the Wiccan understanding of free will. What will you do? Think about it. It is very, very layered. You know what I mean? With multiple different beliefs and interpretations of it. I'm just trying to go through a generalized because there are a lot of different branches in Wicca. But Wiccans are encouraged to live intentionally, to make choices rooted in awareness, and to recognize that freedom is not the same thing as recklessness. The Rede affirms that each individual has the right and the power to shape their own path. When I'm standing here, you could see how Italian I am. I am so sorry. I've just been standing and staring at the camera for 30 seconds. I can't talk without my hands. I'm so sorry if it's distracting. I can't help it. But anyway, with that power comes the ethical obligation to weigh the potential impact of one's actions, not only on others, but also on the greater web of life. It's like what Uncle, oh my gosh, my boyfriend's gonna kill me. He's a huge Spider-Man fan. The uncle in Spider-Man, Uncle Ben. Woo, that was close. Woo. Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. It's not Spider-Man who said it, was actually Uncle Ben. And that doesn't even make me look like a real fan because I couldn't even remember his name. Anyway, in this light, free will is not just like a philosophical idea, but a spiritual principle. It is both a gift and a test. Wiccans are called to act in like alignment with their true will, a deeper sense of purpose, of calling, rather than being driven by impulse, by ego, or external pressure. This notion ties in closely to magical practices itself, or those, kind of types of beliefs where like intention is everything, which I have my own personal views on that. And consequences are inevitable in no matter what, threefold law, that type of thing, which again, I have my own beliefs on that. That's not part of this video. The Rede then isn't about blind permissiveness, given blind permission. It's a challenge to kind of like live with integrity, to know your will, to act upon it, and to ensure that your freedom doesn't come at the cost of another's well-being. True power in the Wiccan thought lies in making choices that honor both the self and the interconnected world that we inhabit. It's not just Wiccans with this belief, but again, because of the Rede, this belief is primarily found in Wicca. Again, you don't have to be Wiccan to have this belief. You're still a witch, my love. But about the world of contemporary magical practices, and the landscape becomes a little bit more complex. Ancient mythologies frequently present a different view. Like in Greek tradition, Moirai, the 3 fates, spin, measure, and cut the threads of our lives. Their decisions unchangeable by even the gods. Similarly, the Norns weave destinies beneath your dresser. The world tree. I just butchered that so hard. I need coffee. Suggesting that an individual autonomy, I could say that, but I can't say you. My witch card just got revoked for today. But our individual autonomy may be more limited than we would like to believe. So, What does this mean for witches and their view of free will? I tried sitting on the couch and Kitty wouldn't let me again. If we take the split brain theory seriously, we might ask, if our conscious mind is not fully in control, do we actually have free will? Sorry, I'm using the natural light, so I'm sorry if the vision changed. In witchcraft, this can be interpreted as the differences between what you think you want and what your deeper spiritual self truly desires. Think about a witch casting a spell. This is my money bowl right here, for abundance, right? So a witch casting a spell for abundance. On the conscious level, they may focus on the material, like money or success. But deep down on the subconscious level, possibly in the more intuitive right hemisphere, they might be asking for growth, or transformation, or spiritual abundance. The question arises, is their free will really guiding the process? Or are they being influenced by forces beyond their full understanding? Now, let's take this in a more spiritual direction. For those of you that may follow a more, spiritual path. Some witches also believe that free will is also about aligning with your higher self, your true essence, the universe's greatest will. This higher self operates on a deeper level, sometimes beyond the reach of the conscious mind. It may be more akin, again, to the right hemisphere of the brain, that part of us that feels our way through life, that's connected to the magical flow of the universe. In this sense, free will isn't just about doing what the logical conscious mind wants. It's about aligning both halves of the brain to work together in harmony. I feel like I sound so sassy in this because I'm trying not to move, so I'm like, and this, guys, and this, and that, and that. Yeah, my ponytail doesn't help with that either. In this sense, free will isn't just doing what the logical, conscious mind wants. It's about aligning both halves of the brain, the conscious and the unconscious, to work together in harmony. When we make decisions that align and resonate with our higher selves, we're essentially evoking magic. Right, Kitty? Manifesting our desires from a place of wholeness, not conflict. And I don't mean manifesting in the witchy way, like the weird MLM witchy law of attraction, where you always have to vibrate high and everything always has to be love and light, and like toxic positivity, and throwing around the word shadow work without understanding what shadow work actually is. I'm not talking about manifesting in that aspect, but I guess I just kind of told you my opinion on it. I mean manifesting as in the literal definition of the word, as in gathering both sides from our brain. Now, a lot of religious traditions teach that human beings have agency, that their choice matters. But also there are greater forces at work, like greater spiritual forces at work, that impact or can even potentially determine the course of events or the ultimate outcome. To what extent does divine will or fate or karma, free will, all that jazz, limit human agency? People draw general conclusions about the nature of the world from their specific experiences. If you have a lot of control in your life, you tend to believe in free will and the efficiency of your own actions. If you don't have much control, on the other hand, you tend to believe that everything is controlled by fate or God or gods or brain chemistry. No matter what view is correct, in whole or in part, what's indisputably true is this: taking action to improve your life will most likely result in improvements than not taking action. Whether you believe you're taking action because of your own will or because it's your fate isn't nearly as important as the fact that you are doing something. Whether we have free will or not, we are far better off, in my opinion, ordering our lives as though we do. But again, that doesn't completely answer the question of whether or not free will exists. The universe in which we live is probabilistic, not terminalistic. I can't say the words right. It's more like rolling dice rather than following like predictive gears and cogs and stuff like that. And a probabilistic, I'm gonna put the word up, universe, anything is possible. Though some outcomes are so inedible that some outcomes are so likely that they seem inedible, while others are so remote that they just may seem impossible. The actions that flow from your will don't promise a specific result, but they shift the odds in your favor, guiding the forces of chance toward your intended outcome. You know, the question of does free will exist and free will versus fate is more of like a philosophical question that can't be answered with complete certainty. But I find this all interesting as heck, though. And it gives me so many questions. The split brain theory offers us a glimpse into how complicated our minds are and challenges how we think about free will. You know, if we wanted to or if we let it. Which again, does that go back to, is that our own free will? It's a wild, thought-provoking idea that could change on how we view our own behavior. The split brain theory gives us a fascinating lens to like view free will from. I got distracted doing this, sorry. But it does give us an interesting lens to view free will from, especially in the realms of witchcraft. It suggests that our conscious decisions might not always be as free as we think, especially when we consider the powerful role of the subconscious, intuition, or even the cosmic forces at play in our daily life if you subscribe to that belief. For some witches, free will might be more about making decisions. It's about learning to align the conscious mind with the deeper mystical currents of the universe. And for others, it may want them to grab reins of hold of the reins of their own life. More because we can't ever fully know. What do you think? Can we truly have free will if we're influenced by forces beyond our conscious awareness? Or is it bigger part in some bigger cosmic dance? I honestly want to know you guys' thoughts in the comment section below. Again, I know this video can be controversial, and I'm not trying to destroy or negate anyone's beliefs, and I hope I don't come across any comments doing the same, especially in my comment section. I know you're all better than that. But I'm just honestly curious to know what you guys think about this. We never stop learning, and we never stop growing. Like, was this too much of like a weird topic? It's like the weird random stuff like this that I love to use to inspire my craft with. And it helps me grow and learn more as a person and an individual and as a witch. You know, person, individual, almost the same thing, just about the same thing. Very nuanced differences. But anyway, I really hope this was as interesting to you as it was to me. Sorry if I hit the microphone, I'm so sorry. I really hope it made you think and get some gears going in your head. Anyway, I rambled for far too long. I hope you're having a wonderful day, evening, night, whatever time it is in the energy space when you are watching this. And I really, truly hope that good things happen to you. See you in the next one. Bye.